Pope Francis made a surprise announcement at the end of the Synod on Saturday. He said he won't be making any modifications to the final document.
Since gaining independence from Italy in 1929, Vatican City has served as the epicenter of the Catholic faith, with the Pope at its helm. As the spiritual leader of over 1.3 billion Catholics worldwide, the Pope's influence extends far beyond the ancient city's walls, shaping the lives and beliefs of millions. Recently, Pope Francis made a shocking announcement about the Vatican City, leaving many stunned. Who is Pope Francis, and what does this groundbreaking declaration mean for the global Catholic community? Let's dive in and explore the details. The announcement. As the world becomes more diverse in its religious, political, and social opinions, few voices remain as influential as those of the Pope of Vatican City. Over the centuries, the Vatican City and the papacy have been universally accepted as the spiritual authorities for billions worldwide. The current Pope, Pope Francis, is iconic in many ways. Pope Francis is known for his groundbreaking radical papacy of many firsts, including his being the first pope from the Americas and the Southern Hemisphere. Lately, the Pope broke yet another record. His latest announcement concerning the Vatican City was utterly radical. Even when he was simply Jorge Mario Bergoglio, Pope Francis always made unpredictable decisions, breaking away from the norms or expectations of him. Most of the time, this way of life warms people's hearts to him. Unsurprisingly, he got a new nickname, the People's Pope, soon after his papacy. Let's get into the details of this announcement. Occasionally, priests and bishops gather in Vatican City to discuss important topics about the Catholic Church's direction and challenges. This gathering, also known as the Synod, will then relate the results of this brainstorming session to the Pope. The Pope will then make some adjustments to the conclusions reached by these appointed men before it is effected. This has always been the process, until now. After the Synod on Saturday, for the first time, Pope Francis declared that he would not modify the final document drafted by the Synod Assembly. Instead, he approved it as is. As he made this announcement, the entire audience was stunned and silent. This was the first time this had happened. Once again, the People's Pope broke away from the norm and tradition. Other popes had always revised the Synod texts, adjusting them to suit their preferences, but not Pope Francis. His reason for making this radical decision further warms people's hearts worldwide. He said it was a way of showing appreciation for the efforts of the men of the Senate for the past 3 years. This won't be the first time Pope Francis has made an unexpected decision. So many incidents over his lifetime showed this dynamic quality of his and his perseverance. Looking back at his childhood, Jorge Mario Bergoglio was a humble boy from Buenos Aires, Argentina, born on December 17, 1936. He grew up in a modest home in a city rich with culture and history. His parents are humble people. His father works at a railway station, and his mother cares for their home. From an early age, Jorge was drawn to faith and service, eventually joining the Jesuit order, known for its emphasis on education and social justice. However, tragedy struck. When the Pope was only 21, he was seriously sick with severe pneumonia, to the point that he had part of his right lung removed. He didn't allow this to stop his goal. In 1958, Jorge entered the novitiate of the Society of Jesus, and 2 years later, he took his first vows as a Jesuit. In 1963, on returning to Buenos Aires, he studied philosophy at San Miguel Seminary. Between 1964 and 1965, he taught literature and psychology at a Jesuit secondary school in Santa Fe, Argentina. In 1966, he He taught at the prestigious Colegio del Salvador Secondary School in Buenos Aires. In 1967, he returned to his theological studies and was ordained a priest on December 13, 1969. As a Reverend Father, Jorge continued to grow in his spiritual journey. In 1992, he was appointed Auxiliary Bishop of Buenos Aires. He was one of 3 auxiliaries and spent most of his time caring for the Catholic University, counseling priests, preaching and hearing confessions. On June 3, 1997, Bishop Bergoglio was named Coadjutor Archbishop. He was installed as the new Archbishop of Buenos Aires on February 28, 1998. People fondly remembered his time as Archbishop as being very relatable. He was known simply as Father Jorge. Right from this time, he had held the attitude that the church belongs in the street. He built chapels and missions in poor areas and sent seminarians to serve them. In 2001, Bishop Bergoglio was elevated to cardinal, and later that year, he served as an official of the Synod of Bishops at the Vatican.
And his selection surprised many. He was never named as a front-runner. Jorge Mario Bergoglio was the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, Argentina.
That same year, Cardinal Bergoglio began a 6-year term as head of the Argentine Bishops' Conference. Finally, on March 19, 2013, at the Feast of St. Joseph, before tens of thousands of people gathered in St. Peter's Square in Rome and millions of others watching virtually, Jorge Mario Bergoglio was installed as the new Pope of the Catholic Church. The inaugural Mass following his installation as the Pope was an unforgettable one. Over 150,000 people filled St. Peter's Square. It was an ecclesiastical moment as they listened to Pope Francis take his new pledge to protect the Catholic Church, the dignity of each person, and the beauty of creation, just like Saint Joseph protected Mary and Jesus. Since then, many of Pope Francis's decisions have shown his adherence to that pledge. This latest decision at the Synod broke new ground as the most experimental ever. Here is another reason why. In the Catholic Synod, particularly one held at the Vatican, there is a category of people referred to as lay people. These are members of the Church who are not part of the clergy, that is, bishops, priests, or deacons. They are also not members of religious orders such as monks or nuns. These people are everyday Catholics, men and women actively involved in the Church and representing the wider faithful community. These lay people haven't had voting rights in the affairs of the Vatican Synod until now. During this Synod, Pope Francis announced the inclusion of lay people as voting members. This is a radical shift from traditional practices followed by his predecessors. This decision warmed the hearts of the lay people and the Catholic family worldwide. Now, regular people in the Vatican, such as Catholic educators or theologians, parish leaders or volunteers, and even youth representatives have a voice. With this decision to include lay people, the Pope seeks to reflect the voices of its broader membership in decision-making processes. With these inclusive decisions and mandates, it's no wonder Pope Francis is called the People's Pope. He plans to do even more soon. He's making new preparations which include innovative initiatives such as the largest survey of baptized Catholics in history, giving millions a voice in shaping church priorities. His whole persona is embodied in his choice of papal name, Francis. Ordinarily, not many popes choose names that other popes hadn't used before. So, when Pope Francis chose his name, it surprised many. However, the reason he gave further stunned them. Pope Francis chose his name from his high regard for Saint Francis of Assisi. All through his time, Saint Francis was devoted to caring for the poor. He was an embodiment of simplicity, humility, and outreach. And this was the legacy Pope Francis also wanted to follow. He wants to lead a church that walks alongside the marginalized and advocates for a world rooted in compassion and care. There is even more to the sensational Vatican Synod declaration. Women's roles in the Church were among the most debated topics in the Vatican. For over a century, women have been excluded from the proceedings of the Vatican leadership affairs. Some were unspoken exclusions, while some were the law. An example of the unspoken exclusion was during the Vatican Council Convention in 1869. Pope Pius IX was the Pope at the time. No one thought of inviting women, but they were nonetheless there. This momentous meeting was the first church-wide meeting of bishops since the Reformation, and the fact that no woman was officially invited raised a lot of criticism back then. But nothing much changed. When Vatican II began in 1962, it was like its predecessor, an all-clerical, all-male assembly. Up to now, things haven't changed sporadically, but there has been some improvement. And then, the unprecedented happened. For the first time, in 2021, Sister Natalie Becquar became the first woman to vote at any Vatican meeting when Pope Francis appointed her Undersecretary to the Synod. She was also in attendance at the gathering of bishops and lay people when the second session took place on October 2nd, 2024. Finally, a door the women of the Catholic faith had been knocking on for centuries opened. Upon her appointment, Becquart expressed her hope that their church would reimagine itself in less hierarchical ways. In addition to Becquart, 53 other female participants, both lay and religious, also attended the Synod. More interestingly, this new inclusion has raised speculation about the possibility of a female diaconate soon. But that's not all. For a very long time, there have been two different dates for the Easter holiday. There is one for the Catholic Church and one for the Orthodox Church. Orthodox Easter usually falls between April 4th and May 8th, and Catholic Easter falls between March 22nd and April 25th. In rare instances, the dates align, and Easter is celebrated simultaneously. One of the Synod's 155 points proposes promoting church unity through concrete gestures and suggests that Christians of different denominations could celebrate Easter on the same day next year, 2025. Several other groundbreaking proposals are included in the document. Proposal on topics such as the importance of Christians, especially seminarians, receiving something it calls an integral education. That is an education that covers not just spiritual but also affective. The document also calls for a closer relationship between the members of different church institutions to foster a sense of community. Despite all these exponential changes, the Pope didn't make any adjustments. This must have caught the entire congregation by surprise. The interview. Just a few months ago, the Pope did another surprising thing no other Pope had ever done before. He agreed to an interview. There is no record of any of his predecessors agreeing to an interview. This unfiltered dialogue showed the world his thoughts on our time's pressing challenges. From conflict and climate change to migrations and church reform, this candid exchange offers a glimpse into the mind of a leader whose vision transcends borders. During this one-of-its-kind sit-down, many people got to know yet another humble side of this enigmatic man. His residence is like no other pope's before him. Here's why. Since 1870, the papal residence has been transferred to the Apostolic Palace in Vatican City. The popes have lived here, from Pius IX to Benedict XVI. The majestic architecture of the Apostolic Palace is like no other. The first marks of the building plans were drawn in 1471, but the construction wasn't completed until 1605, which took over a century to finish. This ancient edifice has drawn many tourists from all over the globe. Although most parts of the Papal Palace are closed to the public, some sections are open. The Sistine Chapel, Clementine Hall, The Borgia Apartments and the Raphael Rooms are situated in this building. Now, here's something curious. Pope Francis doesn't live in the Apostolic Palace. Instead, he lived outside the palace and visited only official visits and Sunday events. He lives at Casa Santa Marta, in Latin, Domus Sanctae Marthae. This building is located just adjacent to the St. Peter's Basilica. It was built in 1996 as the first official guest house reserved for cardinals during a conclave. Pope Francis was the first pope in 110 years not to have lived in the Apostolic Palace. This is because he preferred simpler, smaller, and less isolating accommodation than the palace offered him. He shares the premises with other priests and bishops. He leaves from the Casa Santa Marta to attend the 7 a.m. Mass in the chapel of the Domus. Here's yet another exciting detail about the Pope. Over the centuries, popes took some time during the year to vacation, especially during summer, at a location outside the Apostolic Palace. From 1583 to 1870, the Pope's summer residence was the Quirinal Palace in Rome, with the popes alternating between the Quirinal Palace and the Pontifical Palace. Castel Gandolfo also became a popular summer choice in the 20th century. Which of these options is Pope Francis's favorite? Surprisingly, none. He prefers to stay in Casa Santa Marta during the summer. He says, why? It allows the summer residence to be open to the public during that time. More tourists are around to check out the area during summer break. The Pope's absence allows the palaces to be available for touring. How considerate. Another unique characteristic of Pope Francis is his caring nature. This admirable quality sometimes goes beyond when handling the affairs of the Catholic Church. At a time, he addressed a joint meeting of Congress urging lawmakers to take action on climate change and sharing his views on the death penalty and immigration. He poured out his feelings in the address. He emphasized the shared responsibility for the common good and the dignity of every human being. He highlighted the role of lawmakers in fostering unity through just legislation and referenced Moses as a symbol of law and transcendent human dignity. Speaking directly to the American people, he acknowledged their contributions to society, from hardworking individuals to the elderly, and the youth striving for a better future. The Pope praised historical figures such as Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr., Dorothy Day, and Thomas Merton for their dedication to freedom, justice, and peace. He urged lawmakers to build a future grounded in solidarity and cooperation, resisting violence, hatred, and the dangers of polarization. He called for a balanced approach to addressing global and domestic issues, emphasizing the importance of inclusivity, dialogue, and respect for individual freedoms. He acknowledged America's history as a land of immigrants and urged compassion for the most vulnerable, particularly youth facing hopelessness and despair. The Pope took a firm stance against all modern forms of slavery, advocating for policies that uphold justice and equality. He described a great nation as one that defends liberty, fosters a culture of dreams, and fights for the oppressed. Pope Francis concluded with a vision of a united and just America that inspires people worldwide to dream, act, and build a better future. His speech called for hope, healing, and a commitment to the well-being of all, guided by the principles of fraternity, love, and the common good. Looking back at the first-of-its-kind interview the Pope granted a while back, it was apparent he was deeply concerned about the war in various areas of the world. He has called for an investigation into whether Israel's strikes on the Gaza Strip constitute genocide. He sees what's going on between Gaza and Lebanon as immoral and disproportionate. More of his detailed conversation in the interview has been compiled into a book authored by Hernan Reyes Alcaide, who anchored the interview. The book was released ahead of the Pope's 2025 Jubilee. The title is Hope Never Disappoints: Pilgrims Towards a Better World. There is another reason it is believable the Pope does not forget the Catholic faithful living in Gaza. Beyond the Pope saying he makes nightly calls to them to ask about their condition, some people on the other end of these calls have testified to receiving them. During an interview, one of the parishioners of the Holy Family Catholic Parish in Gaza expressed her gratitude for his encouragement to the suffering community. The unusual encounter deeply touched this religious sister. Sister Nabila Saleh, the parishioner in question, shared a summary of a phone call received from Pope Francis on Monday night. To show the call was not prearranged, it wasn't initially meant for her. Sister Saleh said the Pope had called the parish priest, Father Yusuf. However, due to the language barrier, she had to come in. She said the call wasn't a vague, dutiful way of showing concern, as the Pope was deeply interested in what was happening in Gaza. He wanted to know how many people are sheltering in the parish's facilities and other relevant questions. At the time, there were about 500 people housed within the parish facility. This number included the sick, families, children, the disabled, and people who had lost their homes and belongings to the war. They all felt encouraged to learn about the phone call and the Pope's concern about them. Following up on the phone call, the Pope appealed for peace. He emphasized the human cost of war and urged all sides to embrace negotiation over bloodshed. Also speaking on the war in Ukraine, his pleas for peace have been deeply personal. It was touching to hear him sharing stories of young soldiers lost and families torn apart. These stories further show that he isn't just an indifferent onlooker in all these events. He actively continues to advocate for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. Beyond issues of war, there is also another issue dear to the Pope's heart. Migration and climate change are another category of crises. Pope Francis tackles head-on. A prominent event happened during his first trip as Pope to Lampedusa. Many people might have expected him to take a harsh position against migrants who move illegally. While he didn't condone the illegal extent to which people go to relocate, he showed uncommon sympathy. He spoke of immigration being a complex issue that can be addressed by listening and seeing with our hearts rather than in black and white. He condemned the globalization of indifference, which is rampant and allows so many to suffer unnoticed. He continues to champion the rights of migrants fleeing violence and poverty. His stance on the topic surprised many of his listeners, but many were able to reason with him. He prayed for refugees and migrants lost at sea while trying to reach Europe. The visit itself lasted only a few hours. It concluded with a heartwarming scene of throwing a wreath of flowers into the sea in a sign of mourning before presiding over an open-air mass. The People's Pope continues to marvel at everyone with his insightful takes on issues. His charisma takes on some modern problems plaguing the world, which is usually unexpected. Despite gradually building a radical persona already, his opinion on LGBTQ activities could not have been expected. On October 12, 2024, Pope Francis held a private 80-minute meeting at the Vatican with LGBTQ activists, including a transgender man, a Catholic sister, and a U.S. doctor specializing in gender-affirming care. The gathering, organized by the New Ways Ministry, was not listed on the Vatican's official agenda, but highlighted pressing issues concerning the Catholic Church's stance on transgender health care. Before now, the Vatican had held a firm rejection stance on the issue. However, the gathering urged the Pope to reconsider its firm rejection of such care. They argued that the Vatican failed to consult transgender individuals about their lived experiences before reaching such a conclusion. Endocrinologist Dr. Cynthia Herrick stressed the importance of including transgender voices in church policy making. The Pope was visibly empathetic to the argument. What could this mean? This could be a sign that the Church is evolving to engage with modern societal realities. This encounter underscores Pope Francis's nuanced approach to LGBTQ issues. While he has encouraged priests to bless same-sex couples on a case-by-case basis, his leadership has been inconsistent, occasionally using derogatory language that the Vatican later apologized for. The meeting reflects a broader call for the Church to adopt a more inclusive and compassionate stance, particularly towards transgender individuals, in alignment with the Pope's ongoing efforts to emphasize dignity and respect for all. These varied incidents show some meaningful ways Pope Francis differs from his predecessors. The People's Pope is widely known for his unity, empathy, sustainability, and reform principles. In a world increasingly divided, his ideas go a long way in influencing people to embrace a more inclusive and compassionate future. His words and actions push us to look beyond ourselves and strive for a world that reflects the best of humanity. What do you think of the ideas and principles of Pope Francis? How do you think they shape the future of the Catholic Church? Kindly share your answers, thoughts, and opinions in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to this channel to enjoy more videos like this. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.